welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, we have a repeat guest on, Colin Post from Expat Chronicles. Colin, how's it going, man?
Good, Vance. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining back on the show, and so soon. We said, why not run it back, and we're back for more.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for having me.
Because I know you have unlimited stories. Obviously, you're the founder of expat-chronicles.com. You have a newsletter, podcast. You write long-form content, just lots of articles. So, you're just a basket of stories and lessons, hopefully.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. To be honest, lately the output's been a little low, just getting caught up with family and business. I make less and less time for it. But technically there is a podcast, there is a blog. There are a lot of stories, but most of them are from a long time ago.
No, this is good. I think sometimes round 2 episodes are better because we got the get to know you stuff out of the way. We already did the hero's journey. And now we can just get into the concepts, stories, some fun stuff. So I'll hit you with some random. So you like history in general, right?
Oh my God, yeah, I love it.
What Latin American country have you done the biggest deep dive in history?
Peru by far, because I married Peru in a sense. It's just almost all of the novels that matter, history books in English and Spanish. And I'd also add, just because it's probably the most interesting conquest story. As Americans, we were taught in grade school the conquest of Mexico with Hernando Cortez and the Aztecs, and that's fascinating, don't get me wrong. But if you were interested in that at all, you really got to go down the conquest of Peru rabbit hole. It's so much more interesting.
I liked how it was depicted. And did you see Bolivar, the series on Netflix?
I started it. I've got a bit of a beef with all the romanticization of Simón Bolivar. They're trying to make him George Washington, and he just wasn't that. I don't know. You shouldn't take away from a great military leader, but I mean, that's pretty much all he was a great military leader. There wasn't any, founding concept behind Bolivar or San Martin, any of those guys. They did not have a theory for existing besides, taking the power away from Spain, which it may be noble in itself, but sorry, go ahead.
No. It's funny. It's a sick show. I recommend it. Cause Bolivar spends a lot of time in Peru. He actually, his what is it? His second wife or whatever is from Peru. I'm blanking on everything.
So the way it's told in Peru is his lover. It's his mistress.
Yeah, his lover. Yeah.
Did they marry? I've got to watch it. I didn't know it. I didn't know it had scenes in Peru. He actually wore out his welcome in Lima. Does it depict that?
Oh yeah. Well, there's decades of history there coming and going and stuff. But it's really cool because it's the vice royalty of Spain, and it was a very different Peru back then than it is now. Just seeing the how it used to be. I never really thought about the history of Peru too much until I saw that show.
It was the main seat of power. The silver mines in Potosi is the largest silver mine in human history to date. And it all went through Peru. It was one of the nicknames for Lima was the Pearl of the Pacific. It was an enclave of wealth and opulence. And Mexico and Peru were the 2 first colonies because that's where the largest, most advanced civilizations were in the Aztecs, and then everything that the Incas presided over. So that was basically, human resources. We don't want to say slaves, but I mean basically slaves, cheap labor, and that was so they kind of left North America, and some of the the Southern Cone stuff was a lot more sparsely populated and not very organized. If you have your first pick of the lands, you want to take the civilizations that are already have complex societies and hierarchies that you could just come in and sit at the top for. But a long way to say Peru was a big deal in the early trajectory of the Spanish colonization, and it's been a long fall. But at the yeah, it was the top of the it was at the top of the pecking order in South America for the first couple of centuries.
That's actually so fascinating to go into because, yeah, I mentioned Bolivar, but that was 1800s. And really the history goes all the way back to the 1500s. I think Pizarro went, right?
Yeah, Pizarro was the guy who spearheaded the conquest of the Incas.
Yeah. So there's a good podcast on, have you ever heard of the Explorers podcast?
No.
So the Explorers podcast it's like just it's pretty much only a podcast, and you can find it. And it's just some guy that tells a lot of these like conquistador type of stories, and they do one on Pizarro, and and there might even be a separate one on Peru. I forget if they're combined. And anyway, so he was talking about how Pizarro landed in Panama, right?
Yep.
And they're in Panama and they meet the locals in Panama, like the indigenous there. And the indigenous are like, yeah, like, there wasn't too much built up, right? But and they're like, oh, the real kingdom is like down south. And so there was this whole like idea, like, should we stay in Panama and build it up here, or should we, do a Hail Mary and like try to make it to this far off land called Peru?
El
Uh,
Dorado was what
yeah,
El Dorado is what they golden. That's what they kind of knew it as. Yeah. That sounds right up my alley. I got to check that one out.
yeah, that's another one I recommend to people.
So I think El Dorado was Cusco. Um, I I haven't gone far enough down the rabbit hole. Historians may be screaming bloody murder here if they hear me saying this on a podcast, but I imagine just the descriptions of Cusco. I would think, especially everything's word of mouth because they didn't really have a writing system. I would think that would have been El Dorado. I mean, they had life size llamas in gold, like looking like a llama, life size. The Spanish just stripped everything off all their buildings, that llama statue, everything, melted it down into bars, stamped it, and put it on a ship for Spain. Um, but the search for El Dorado, yeah, they were in Panama, where there's just not the advanced civilizations, not as many people, and they're not really in the Bronze Age there either, where they kind of were in Peru. They were starting to work with light metals, like gold, and it was a bit of a gamble to go down there looking for it. But as soon as they were it was off the coast of Ecuador, northern Peru, that they found a fishing boat, and they just saw that I might make a mistake here if it was balsam wood or whatever, but they could tell by this boat that this was a more advanced fishing culture, and that this was something to send for more people for. They had an exploratory vessel first. Does the podcast talk about that?
Mhm.
Anthony and Lucas Pizza Kitchen franchise is the hottest pizza and cheesesteak franchise concept in the United States. With average unit volume well over $1 million, average rent falling below 5%, average payroll falling below 20%, and the best food in the pizza and cheesesteak niche, Anthony and Lucas Pizza Kitchen franchise is your choice for those looking to invest in the next level of pizza franchise across the United States. Find out more on our website, anthonyandlucaspizza.com.
It does.
Yeah. Oh, it does? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it tells like this whole story, and there's like two ships and a mutiny or something. You tell me. I don't know.
I don't know about the mutiny. I know there's a huge civil war between the Spaniards later after the conquest of the Incas. That's why it's more interesting. But it was, I understand, they just took all the fishermen right off the boat and took them right back to Spain and said, look at this. Maybe they had drawings of it. Obviously, they didn't take the boat. But they said, this is an advanced civilization. Here are the Indians, and we need help. We need money. We need financing. And they got it. What I would say set apart the conquest of the Incas from the conquest of the Aztecs is Hernando Cortez, and in today's little more social justice, racial justice kind of environment, they want to paint him as a villain or whatever. But I think by most accounts, and he was a little, maybe seems a little Machiavellian in his stratagems, but I think he was generally like kind of his mission was to bring Christianity to the natives. I think the guys who went to Peru, I mean, this was a for-profit venture. They were not. They didn't. I mean, sure, maybe some of them wanted to bring Catholicism to the natives, but I mean, they really wanted to get rich, and it shows in how they behaved compared to how Cortez behaved.
There's so much stories from back in this period. Do you have a couple that like you really find interesting?
Uh, yeah. One thing I tell people, whether they're, I don't know. I just think that the first real engagement. This is just completely different than what happened with the Aztecs. But so Pizarro, I want to say he's got 50 Spaniards, and these are fortune hunters. These are middle class. These aren't like totally poor people, but these are not the aristocrats either. These are middle class people looking to be rich in another country, to make their names and become rich. But basically, middle class people suited up in armor and horses, fortune hunting. And he got like 50 of them. And the Incas hear about them as soon as they arrive. I mean, they had a sophisticated communication system. So they knew that these Spaniards were in Peru, like when they landed to the coast. And so they sent, I'm going to get the number wrong, how many thousands, but I mean, it's no less than 2,000. I want to say they said 20,000 soldiers to go meet these 50 Spaniards. And they meet up in Cajamarca in northern Peru. And in the first engagement battle, the 50 Spaniards win and capture Atahualpa, the Inca king. 50 against however many thousands, and the 50 win. And that is just how the war goes until they capture Cusco. I mean, it's just 50 versus thousands over and over again until past Cusco. You know, and every time they engage, the Spaniards are 50 versus thousands, and the 50 win.
This is the first capturing.
This was actually Cajamarca where they get the king. They get the king before they even knew. They didn't even know about Cusco. He had to tell them about Cusco. And remember, Cusco is the Inca capital, which I think was probably El Dorado. Me, not the historian. They knew they were looking for El Dorado, but it wasn't called El Dorado. I mean, it's a Spanish word. They would have been speaking Quechua. I think that was probably El Dorado, and historians maybe. I'm not a historian, but they didn't even know where the capital was. They just captured the king the first time they met him. The first time they met any Inca soldiers, 50 versus 2,000, and the 50 win. And that's because of horses and steel. That's what did it. I mean, you got to imagine the Incas they've never seen a horse. They've never seen an animal that big, and they're afraid of it. But also the mobility horses give you. You can get in and get out. You can get away, lateral movement. And then steel, everybody thinks about guns. They wouldn't have been, they had to be loaded. It took time. You're not going to be 2,000 like that. What really gave them the advantage was the lance. So you could kill at 10 yards, 20 yards, lances, steel armor. And then you also got to think the Incas, they're in the Bronze Age. They don't have heavy metal. So they're using blunt objects. It'd be like going to war with baseball bats and slings with a rock. They'd sling rocks and swing with baseball bats. That's how they fought wars before the Spaniards brought heavy metal, the Iron Age, basically. They were in the Bronze Age before this. Their leather would have been of not even leather because they don't have cattle. So they would have had, animal skins, whatever animal skins, I guess alpaca and llama skins. That would have been, if they had armor at all, that's what they would have had. Yeah. Did they talk about this on that Explorers podcast?
No, I didn't know too much about. I didn't know anything about Cajamarca, really.
Are you looking it up now? That's what it's called.
Yeah. I'm looking it up on Grok a little bit.
So they held cool. Atahualpa.
They say against 80,000.
80,000. See, I don't know if I buy that, but yeah, definitely. I'm saying 2. I knew 2 is lowballing it. I would guess 10 to 20. I believe 10 to 20,000. Hey, maybe they're right. Maybe it's 80,000. It's just hard for me to even imagine 80,000 people organized enough to march into a place. I've never been to Cajamarca, but I know I don't know. It wouldn't have looked like it was today. I don't know. Maybe it's 80,000. That's just hard for me to get my head around, because the communication system that they had was basically a system of roads, these mountain roads, and they had a network of runners, basically marathon runners, who would run the message. I don't know how many miles they would go, probably 5 to 10. And there'd be another runner waiting to get the message and pass it along. And so these roads, I doubt, I mean, imagine some of these roads accommodating 80,000 soldiers through the mountains. It's just hard for me to imagine that logistically. But hey, if that's what the historians say, who am I? Go 50 versus 80,000. When it's first, if it's 50 versus 80,000, it might as well be 50 versus a million. There's a point where it just doesn't matter. There's only so many that can get to the front.
It's very organized.
Yeah. So then Atahualpa, they've got him kidnapped, and they brought these Indians back, the fishing Indians back to Spain, however many years before, and so these guys speak Spanish now, so they can interpret. And they bring them, so they've got Atahualpa and they've got interpreters, and Atahualpa's promising them everything to let them go, and they fill a room with gold. Like Atahualpa puts his hand up, who knows, above his head somewhere in this room that they've taken over in one of the houses that would have been built in Cajamarca, where they kept him. He said, "I'll fill this room with gold." He figured out the Spaniards want the gold. He said, "I'll fill this room with gold up to here if you let me go." And the Spaniards, "Yeah, okay, let's fill it with gold." And Atahualpa called it in. He said, "We need to fill this room with all. This is what they want for my life. Let's bring the gold in." And the Incas delivered. They brought the gold in, filled the room with gold, and the Spaniards killed him anyway. Maybe I shouldn't be laughing, but it's kind of whatever. It's a mess. It's worth reading, though. The Conquest of Peru, Conquest of the Incas.
And that's just one chapter.
Yeah, that's really just the start of it. I would recommend John Hemming's Conquest of the Incas, another one that's very good. A later guy, Macquarie. Macquarie wrote The Last Days of the Incas. They're both the same story. They're both great. Either one, though, get all the major inflection points. Last Day of the Incas or Conquest of the Incas. Conquest of the Incas was kind of the old golden standard. Last Days of the Incas came out later.
Have you ever gotten in touch with some of these historians at some of the books that have written some of the LATAM history books?
I never have. I wonder if so. I've read some Spanish texts on the history of Peru. I don't think I've gotten in touch with them either. No, I don't think I have. I should have by now, huh? You think there's a big market for that? You think there's a lot of demand for that, or these expats interested in Latin America? Speaking for myself, I don't think I bothered to learn very much until I was down there for at least a few years. My first few years, I wouldn't have said I didn't care, but I didn't spend much time reading entire books about it.
Mm-hmm. Now this is like what I do, before I go to a destination, read the history and all that. I guess I've always done that, but
you have to. Absolutely. That's if I had a how to go down to Latin America guide out there, that's definitely
so
early. I would say that you got to learn a little bit about the culture. You're kind of walking in a little blind, and I was foolish in a lot of situations, not knowing.
Yeah, if you don't know anything about the history, you look kind of dumb. When you're
not just because you don't know the history, but you'll step in it. You'll step into some mistakes, So if you read either one of those books I recommended, right away you're going to get it. There's this huge divide in Peru between the elite white Spanish last names and the giant mass of Indians. Now, most people are going to be mestizo, a mix of both. But, coming from the United States where the main divide is white and black and Hispanic is just Hispanic, I didn't really get that. I didn't really understand that. And I made some mistakes, some real cultural faux pas in my first year in Peru, which I wouldn't have even been aware of at some of the time. But one of them, I'll just tell one story right now that I'm really embarrassed about. But so one of the things that and this will be true in some of the Black Colombians, but definitely the Peruvian indigenous blooded will give their children names like Franklin and Washington and Emerson and stuff like that. And I assume it's kind of like a rejection of the Spanish elites, just kind of like how, Black Americans name their kids like Dewan or whatever, Devante to reject the slave owner names, So anyway, they got these names like Franklin and Washington. I'm like, what are these people naming these names like this for? So I was like, I was clowning around in the office and one of the new kids, like his first day in his big company, and his name's Washington or something like that. And I would think you'd want to be proud of the Inca heritage just because I didn't have any education. I hadn't read the Conquest of the Incas yet. I was, that's an Inca name, isn't it? Washington. Obviously, it's about as American as it gets, right? And that's got to be an Inca name, right? And I didn't realize I'm embarrassing this kid even more, showing off his Indian parents who gave him this silly name in front of all the, good Spanish Jose's and Carlos's in there that, would never name their kid Washington. I didn't really realize I was embarrassing this kid in front of everybody. I thought I was just being good fun, but that's kind of something I cringe at today, how I made this kid feel on his first day in the big office, Oh man, I'm losing you on audio.
Oh, sorry, I went on mute. There was
I
a
got you now.
moto that went by. That's good. It's like, imagine it's like this is my dog Pizarro. It's like, why you named your dog Pizarro?
I named my dog Larco. It's like a Rockefeller. It's like a name like Rockefeller or Roosevelt in Peru. Larco Avenue, and there was an old historian that discovered the moche culture. Larco Museum is one of the top things to do in Lima. But yeah, we got my cat's name is Maca. I've been selling Maca since '08.
LARCO.
What?
LARCO.
Yeah. It's probably best known for the museum among the gringos, but among the Peruvians, Larco Avenue in Lima is kind of like, I don't know, Broadway in New York or something.
Dude, the museums in Peru are insane. Like the level, like the artifact quality is insane.
Yeah, I mean, it was the cradle of the civilization in the Americas. Yeah, we've done museums in Colombia and Argentina. I wouldn't have been confident enough to say that Peru's the best in class in that sense, but maybe it is.
It has to be, and
Yeah.
all over the country too. I've always found the Peru stuff. You must agree was like way more sophisticated than pretty much anything like south of there. Like in the most of the Argentina stuff actually comes from the north in like Jujuy and Salta area, right, where it was like closer to Peru because I think they were getting some of that.
That was Inca. That was under Inca control. Yeah, the north of Argentina was under Inca control. Yeah, no doubt, though. Mexico and Peru. That's why the Spaniards went there. That's where the most advanced civilizations were, where they could waltz right in and park themselves at the top and kind of create the Spanish feudal system with themselves at the top. Everything else, the Spaniards had the first pick. Portuguese, kind of a close second. But the Spaniards had their first pick of the entire North America and South America, and they went to Mexico and Peru. North America just completely left it alone. No point,
It's definitely the two biggest points of. It's actually kind of ironic how they happen to be the two biggest gold or mining hubs, as well as the two biggest sort of pre-Hispanic civilizations in terms of like
Yeah, that definitely
sophistication.
played a role. El Dorado, like you said, yeah.
Sophistication of yeah, actually maybe that makes sense.
Now we found more gold. Obviously, California. We've found stuff since then, but they just didn't have the natives there exploiting it. So they would have had to do the exploration on their own, the Spaniards, and they'd rather just why do that when you can just come into something that's proven. I mean, we've obviously found mines elsewhere since then, but if the Incas are already getting it out, they already know how to mine. Why go start something new? We could just take them over.
Yeah, it's not that it's a coincidence, but it's kind of funny that so these two most successful civilizations they just happen to be sitting on a whole lot of gold. I don't know if it played a part, but they're definitely the two largest sort of the two hubs, right? Like in like near the closer you get to the equator, the less stuff at a point. Like Panama didn't have too much going on pre 1500s.
Right. And I've thought about this. I've been on Twitter more, and there was this idiot saying something that I couldn't help responding to. It's hard to let idiots alone, but saying something about the conduciveness to life in Peru is beneath that of Colombia, something like that. I've thought about why it wouldn't have been, because Colombia is definitely conducive to life. I think it's just captured in Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, 100 Years of Solitude. Like that geography before the internal combustion engine. I mean, that's just difficult to communicate between different communities. Whereas in Peru, in the desert or in the mountains, the mountains are difficult too. But the cradle of civilization really was in the desert. The first civilizations to come out of Peru were in the coastal desert, and you've got rich fishing waters and flat land that's easier to kind of cooperate with other communities. Where in Colombia, at least in the Andes part, if you've ever done a road trip there, I mean, just imagine trying to get around between communities. That's my theory. I don't know, but that's kind of my theory.
Yeah, I think this stuff is extremely understudied. I think it's pretty new discipline, sort of the mix of archaeology and history, ethnology, and discovering these archaeological sites. Like a lot of them haven't even, really been excavated, and you have very few people who are really dedicated to this stuff. Like I think like a lot of the sources, when I was looking at stuff in Mexico, a lot of the books had never been translated to English. Like a lot
Yeah,
of
totally.
I'd be looking at books about the Olmecs and stuff, and about or like astronomy and stuff like that, and they just had never been translated to English. Like stuff.
I wonder if that'll change with AI though. Like I'm thinking of the two giant textbooks I read in Spanish, which is a real slog. Um, and I don't want to get into advanced Spanish or anything like that, but reading a textbook in Spanish, I don't know how many you've read, like an academic textbook, 400 pages. I've done two now. And, I don't know if they made that much money in Peru. So translating them to English, I just don't know if there's an economic justification to do that. But now with AI, it's not going to cost, you don't have to pay a translator to translate this very difficult text. AI would probably do a pretty good job. That's a good point. I bet you could just throw them up on the Kindle, and the weirdos like us who want to do a deep dive into it.
They just have to be digitized, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not digitized. I'm not sure about that. I would guess they're not digitized now, but I just don't know. I doubt they make much money. Just the average Latino reads and this was true when I moved to South America in '08. The average number of books per year was under one. Even in Argentina, where Argentina, it used to be like a positive integer, right? Like it used to be a substantial number. Like when I say substantial, I mean for an average human, American anyway, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And it's less than one now. So yeah, you go to a place like Peru or Colombia and you're a lot closer to zero. So the economics of books, I don't know that much about it, but I know they don't read much. And the Kindle adoption, the ebook adoption, I don't know where that's at. I could see why
you can
not
put it
much
in
is.
podcast format too, like an Audible book. So you can put out the normal paperback and hardcover book, and then also put out the Audible. So for example, like I have a Learn Spanish book that people can buy. Link in the description. It's it's on Amazon. It's done really well. It sold thousands of copies. Classic, like all-in-one Learn Spanish book. And the Audible makes some money actually, because we put it on Audible, and when people download it, you actually get paid. So it's kind of interesting. Is it's almost like a podcasting platform where you get paid for the friggin' downloads, as opposed to normal podcasting, which is basically for free. But so the Audible pays, and so I was thinking that there's so many, like me, I can listen to as much history as I can get my hand.
How
I'll
old are
listen
you?
to geography, history, like as much as I can get my hand. Like that.
How old are you?
That how old am I?
Yeah.
In my 30s.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I wish my kids would say something like that. That's about the time when people start getting into knowledge and education. The trick is getting the kids into it when they're still young. But I mean, I have uncles, guys who, were tradesmen who didn't go to college. And I got one uncle that dropped out of high school, but they turn 40 and they become readers. They're just fascinated by history, and
Good. Yeah.
you get older and you just, I don't want to watch.
Making a comeback, but I've always read. I've just always read. So but and I listen to a lot of podcasts in history, like, and I listen to them in other languages too. Like I listen in Spanish and Portuguese, French, and listen to I listen to like history podcasts in Portuguese, right?
Wow.
And so that so you're kind of getting like a bit of a two for one where you're learning history and you're learning the language, right? But
Yeah.
the point I'm trying to make is that I think there's a lot of stories, like history stories, especially around uh, the, the age of exploration and the age of discovery, that are just not really well known. Like we know a couple of the big guys, Balboa, Pizarro, a couple of the stories, but there's like hundreds of years of history there. There's a lot going on. Like I think there's and obviously even there's just so much going on that I think a lot of these stories have actually not been digitized well. They've never been written about, or they just haven't been put together in a new cohesive package where you can just like sort of repackage these stories in like a new fun way.
That was my dream. There was once upon a time. My dream was to write the basically the conquest of the Incas and have it one of these hyper realistic series. I guess like you said that Bolivar on Netflix is basically what I don't know what Game of Thrones did or Boardwalk Empire, these hyper realistic history series on the conquest of the Incas. That was a dream of mine, and I still think it'd be good, but
And no,
just life got in the way.
this is exactly what I'm saying. And let's just take it like a step more niche down, where let's just say there's like a Peruvian Spanish mining company that was like really prestigious and stuff, like in the 1700s, like Peru mining, like let's just search it up. There's whatever. So there obviously is one, right? And then we'd make a book about this mining company and like the personalities and like the dynamics around that time and like the impact, or just like do like sort of deep dives on different things, right? Or like do so it's like like really going a step further and getting into a lot of these sort of smaller stories that have never really been told. Like if you like just that you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. We can be partners. Are you picturing a series or a book?
Um
You'd have to start with a book,
well,
right?
with AI it's really interesting now where you can like AI can literally write a whole 40, 50,000 page book, like the snap of your fingers, and it can actually be pretty good. It can be what you want it to be, like where you can say like, okay, here's going to be the chapters, and you can give it as much guidance, and so you can actually really get the book that you want. So like you can get the book that you want, and then it can be done. The audio version you could then do an AI voice, or you could pay someone to do a real voice for it, and then boom, you have the product. You have the book, and you have the audio book, and it's like pretty easy to spin these things up, and with AI and automation, it's basically like automatic. Like it's actually kind of going to zero, but there's value in the creativity of like finding stories that people are interested in, or history lessons, stuff like that. Because there is like content that I look for that I can't. So there's as many podcasts and stuff as I suppose there are. There's actually not that many about a lot of these things. Like for example, there's very few books about Paraguay, for example. Stuff like that.
Yeah, I hear you.
So you just
Yeah, I
basically
don't.
go
I
like,
don't know.
"Hey
I
AI,
kind of
write
shelved that
this."
dream. I'd have to think about it.
You just go, "Hey AI, write this like 50,000 page book about like the Paraguayan War."
So, have you done that yet? Have you done an AI book?
I know I've been playing around with it right now. Like I have some scripts, um, like exactly what I'm saying. Like I have some like 50,000 page scripts for different books. I haven't published them quite yet. They do AI checks on some of these things. Like it's kind
Yeah,
of in a funny place. Like I've been experimenting with how much like I can get away with on the YouTube channel and stuff
yeah.
with
I'm
AI.
a big Kindle reader. I read a lot of Amazon ebooks, and there's a lot of horse shit out there that you can tell is not AI just because of how bad it's written. But like, I wanted a history of Quebec. Remember, I
Yeah,
told you last time I visited Montreal. We went throughout Quebec and just, I really did my homework before going there. And this book was just so bad. It couldn't have been AI. It's just AI wouldn't write that bad.
it
On
was
the
an
other
audiobook,
hand,
or it was a book you bought on Amazon or something.
yeah, oh yeah. It's still on there. When I wrote about Quebec, I linked to it, and it's not a good book. I was so moved. I wrote I wrote a review for this book, and I said this is not a good book, but it's all there is, and it's a quick read, and it kind of covers some big points. But it was definitely not AI. I think it was just like a French. It was like English as a second language, maybe a little bit of a socialist in there. Like there was just the number of times I actually searched how many times does the word bourgeois appear in this book, and it was like 9. Like, that should not appear in any history book that many times, you know. So I just wrote a little review. I didn't give it a 1 star. I gave it like a 3. This needs some work, but it's, you know, pick it up. It's just such an easy read. Anyway, the point is, yeah, there's some bad stuff out there, and AI could provide some, you know, fill some gaps. But I think on the other hand, like I'm starting to use AI all the time in work and in my personal life. And sometimes there is a human element that you were touching on that needs to be added. Like half of an AI answer, I don't read. Like some of it's just unreadable. And on my team in my business, I can tell when they give me an AI report, and
Yeah, I kind of don't
you
mind
skim
if
it.
it's
Oh,
AI.
at most you skim it. It's just there's a lot of word salad stuff. The word salad problems in the AI. You know, it's
It's
just
true.
boring. The human element's what gives it some zest. You know, some flavor. It needs some raw emotion, and I think I'm good at that as a writer. And I don't think AI will. Maybe oh God, famous last words. Maybe AI will do that someday, but I don't think so.
I think what's cool is it makes it economically feasible to bring some of these stories into the world where before, like, it probably was not worth your time to write the book about, you know,
Provincial Paraguayan history, yeah,
yeah,
in English.
yeah, provincial Paraguayan history. But now you can get that book written. Like, I'm down to listen to it on a podcast while I'm working out, you know.
Yeah,
But I don't want to. But like when you had to actually write a 50,000 page book, I mean that's a huge investment, right? But
yeah,
now, like, it's just like, pretty easy to make exist. I don't know.
I hear you.
Yeah. So we do have to get wrapping up in a couple minutes here. I do have a call at the hour. What are some other, like, on Peru, since we've been talking about that so much? What are some other good stories there that people could use this as a jumping off point and take a look at? Like, what are some good?
Yeah, I had no idea we were going to be talking about history. I would have put a little more thought into it. So, top of the list, no doubt about it, conquest of the Incas. After that, you'd start to look into the either the colonial history or the Republican era, and just spitballing because I don't have a ready answer, but I would say the Republican era after Bolivar and San Martin liberated the continent. I think it's kind of the same story in every country, and I think that's kind of interesting to understand. There's not a particular anecdote, but I think to understand Latin America, you really have to understand that there was no, and I'm going to butcher this in French, raison d'être. There was no reason to exist. There was no, like, in the United States, they they did have a reason to exist. They wanted self government. You know, they did not want, you know, taxation without representation. They had these sayings. In Spain, there was no theory of governance. There was no reason to separate from Spain, except that in the Cadiz they had passed a bunch of liberalizing laws. You know, you had the Indians had rights, the slaves had right, or we were going to be freed, and they were going to upset the feudal system in Latin America, which they wanted nothing to do with. That was what finally pushed them to independence. They didn't really have a theory for government, so when they got it, you see just these kind of warlords and caudillo. You know, they got a word for them. These local dictators separating off and coups and power games, and there was just, you know, it wasn't a movement for democracy. It wasn't a movement for any coherent way of doing things. It was just we're taking the power away from Spain, and then it was just a battle for power. It was Game of Thrones, basically, and that's why the country splintered. It was originally originally it was just two colonies in Peru and Mexico, but by the time of Bolivar, I guess Argentina, Chile, Gran Colombia, and Peru. It's basically 4, maybe 5. I don't know. The captaincy of Venezuela was really something different, but you had Gran Colombia, you had Peru, you had Argentina and Chile, and they splintered into how many more countries? Uruguay was invented, Paraguay, Bolivia, Ecuador, Venezuela. And that's because they didn't have anything to hold them together. Mexico lost not just the isthmus, they lost, Guatemala, Honduras. Like, those countries really need to exist? I don't think so, right? Like, and then they lost half of their territory in the Western United States because they couldn't populate it. They didn't have an effective government. They didn't really have control over what is now Mexico. They barely had control of that. They had no control whatsoever over the Western United States. I think that I don't know exactly what anecdote to use to explore that, but that's the same story everywhere. The coups, the losing territory, just not having any rational theory for governance, and Brazil did not go that way. Brazil, when that started, they had a little head start, right? When Napoleon came into Spain, they sent the whole royal court to Rio. And so Portugal became the colony, and Rio became the seat of the empire. And they saw what happened in Spanish America, and they realized they wanted nothing to do with that, and they could take their time and go slower. And that's really what held Brazil together, was not moving so fast for independence.
Dude, as we get to wrapping up, we really got to wrap up, but I wanted to share this one thing with you, which is I had this book idea for the Paraguayan War, and I hit up this.
Is this the war Argentina started? The Paraguayan War?
Arguably. Okay. So just real quick, and then so I hit up this guy named Thomas Wiggum, who wrote like the history of the Paraguayan War, basically. And I said, this is back in 2021, and I said, "Hi, Mr. Higgum. I'm at the beginning stage of researching a book about the Paraguayan War and a specific niche within that. Could I get your feedback on an outline and some tips?" And he hits me back. This is out of the blue. Like, I didn't email 100 professors. Like, only guys I probably emailed. And he goes, "Hi, nice to hear from you. Burton arrived a little bit late in Paraguay to see the battlefields, but he collected a bunch of useful material, blah, blah, blah. You want to familiarize yourself." Like, he gave me this, it's over 1,000-word response. And all I did was write like 2 sentences about like, hey, and he just wrote me like 1,000 words about like, things to look into for the book, and like how to maybe structure the book, or, some avenues to pursue. So I really encourage anybody listening to this, like, a lot of these people who have written, say, history books on Latin America, or put out content about history or geography or whatever, they're more approachable than you think. Like, you can, there's no harm in hitting them up and collaborating. And a lot, this is obviously something they're passionate about.
Yeah, I that's it. 1,000 words, you think?
Dude, I wish I could share my screen and show you the block of text this guy emailed me back.
That's cool. I'm looking at his author page right now. Actually, I think that just goes back to, why there's no, why a lot of these books aren't out there is there's just not much money in it. That's
the thing, is in 2021, I didn't have the time to write a 50,000 page book, but now with AI, and then now I can sort of like package it, that I think there's something cool there. But yeah. I want the lesson.
What I was saying is a labor of love for this guy. I'm
labor of love. And
yeah, it's a labor of love for him. That's why he's to find somebody else interested in Paraguay. He doesn't get that many emails like that. You know what I mean? So, oh my God,
and that exact same thing exists for Peru. I guarantee you. There's a lot of Peru history nerds out there. So hit them up. Hit up your heroes. You'd be surprised. Okay, we got to drop. I got to get to another call. Colin, you're the man. This has been another episode of My Latin Life podcast. Colin Post, Expat Chronicles, expat-chronicles.com.
Thanks, Vance.
Cheers.
Yep, see ya.